What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the Modern Warfare weapons and how they fit into the current meta. I think for the first time in a long time, there are a lot of really viable Modern Warfare weapons, and that's pretty cool. I think a lot of people really liked the way Modern Warfare weapons felt, and we all kind of had to switch over to the Cold War weapons after integration for a lot of different reasons. They were overpowered, and to begin with, they had all kinds of issues, but they were still really good. And now I feel like the Modern Warfare meta is sort of back. It's sort of just well balanced all around, but I'm going to talk about all the different Modern Warfare guns that I feel like are very viable right now, how they fit in, give you guys some recommended builds for some of them, and talk about some unique things you might not have thought about with respect to the Modern Warfare weapons. But as always, if you like the content, please drop a sub, a like, and a comment, and help us out with the YouTube algorithm and help us keep growing. It helps us support the YouTube channel and the website. But let's jump into it, and we will start talking about the Modern Warfare weapons. All right, so I'm just briefly going to go through these guns and talk about which ones I think are pretty good. So the Modern Warfare AK-47, if for some reason like nerfed it into the ground when it wasn't that good before. It wasn't like it was an OP gun, but it's really bad now unless you use the 5.45 rounds, in which case it's actually pretty good. But then you only have those 32 rounds and it's more of an SMG. So that was an annoying change to me because I liked the AK. It was one of those guns that had a lot of recoil, but was actually really fast to kill if you actually mastered it. AN-94 is one of those guns that shoots marshmallows but is really accurate, and we've seen that those always end up coming towards the forefront of the meta for long range for primaries. So we've got two options on TrueGameData. You can look at the AN-94 or the AN-94 with no hyperburst. So basically this is the TTK of the full auto fire versus the TTK including that hyperburst hitting. So somewhere in between the two is really what a real AN-94 TTK is going to look like in most cases, because you're not going to hit that hyperburst all the time. But it's okay. It's not great. It's okay. AS Val is okay again. They nerfed it really bad a while back. It's not a primary, but as an SMG, it's still pretty good. It's just kind of like there might not be a whole lot of reason to use it with some of the other options that are out there right now. C58 AMAX. The AMAX is pretty good. AMAX got a lot of nerfs because it was meta for a long time. But it's back in a spot where it's pretty decent again, and it's going to feel like going home to a lot of people because so many people loved the AMAX and used the AMAX. Sort of like the M4, actually. We'll talk about that when we get there. FAL's always had ridiculous TTKs, but it's just really difficult to use. The Scar has a really good neck multiplier and a pretty good chest multiplier, but it's still held back by that recoil and the 30-round mag. I tried to use it. TTKs look okay if you look at certain shot locations like neck and chest compared to other guns, but really in terms of how you're actually going to be hitting people, it's not very good, and I wouldn't really recommend it still. The FR556 is okay. It's actually, I would say, pretty much as good as the M16 and the AUG now, which is crazy to say. I don't know if they changed it at some point or if nobody was good at with burst guns or what, but it's actually not that bad. It's usable. Same with M16 and the AUG. I would say they're usable. I would say they're not really meta, but they're usable. And FR fits in that nicely. Right now, the annoying thing with the M16 and the AUG is that they only have the 4x sight for a lot of zoom. We know that we used to use the axial 3x before it got changed. So back when it had like sniper scope levels of zoom and a sniper scope sight picture, that was one of the things that made the M16 and the AUG so good, is we had such a good optic to use with them. And now that the Axial Arms 3X has been basically made like a VLK, it actually has a little bit less zoom than a VLK. The only option is to go to that 4X, which has so much zoom, it's really hard to manage on those two guns. And that's one of the nice things about the FR556, is we have the 3.25x Scout Combat, we have the 3.5x Cronin, so you can kind of get a different level of zoom rather than just going straight up to that 4X, which has tons and tons of zoom on the Cold War guns. So that's one benefit the FR has. The Grau, again, very accurate. Sort of slow TTKs, but again, for primaries, that's fine. Like, we know that we don't need a fast TTK for a primary. As long as it hits its shots at range, that's all that matters. It's a pretty good gun right now. Kilo still has that third drop off, so it's still not great for Verdansk. It's actually really good for Rebirth because a lot of your engagements are going to be inside that 85-meter range. M13 gets a lot of crap for some reason. I don't know why. Like, you say you like using the M13 and people make fun of you for no apparent reason, because it has competitive TTKs. It has good TTKs, just like the Grau. The recoil feels better than the Grau to me. It uses more ammo and it shoots marshmallows. People always say that, like, it feels like it takes 100 shots to kill. Well, of course it does. I mean, it shoots fast. That's the way all those guns work. So it feels like it's not doing very much damage, but the actual TTKs and DPS are really good still. So I love the M13. It's one of the most satisfying guns for me to use. Honestly, I really, really like it. I think it's in a good spot right now. The M4A1. I was playing Iron Trials yesterday. I picked up someone's M4, and I was just shocked. I was shocked at how much of a beam it was and how fast it was killing people. It feels fantastic to me, and I think it's a great Iron Trials gun. It's great for regular Verdansk too. And like I mentioned earlier, the VLK actually has a little bit more zoom than the Axial 3X now, so I feel like the 3X for the Cold War guns doesn't have enough zoom for me in a lot of cases. So that's actually a big plus for me that the VLK has just a little bit more. It's only like, 15% more zoom or something than the Axial 3X, but that's still really nice. So the M4 with that standard long range build that we used to use all the time, and a VLK feels like an absolute beam, and it has really good TTKs. The Odin, as always, has fantastic TTKs. It's just basically impossible to use. I've tried to make it work with every build you can possibly imagine because the TTKs are so good. But I just don't think it's possible, unfortunately. I've even tried using compensators and maximum recoil reduction attachments. It's just, I can't make it work. Maybe somebody else can, but I can't. Ram 7 still has the best TTKs of all those 5.56 weapons, but it only has a 50 round mag, and the recoil is a little bit harder than the other guns. And it has that sharp up to the left recoil that very few guns have, so that makes something like the M4 feel a lot better than the Ram 7 in my opinion for primary use. But the Ram 7 is great as like a sniper support still. The one thing is mobility is a little bit worse than some of your other options with Cold War guns still. But TTK wise, the Ram 7 is highly competitive in a lot of situations. All right, I'm going to try to go a little faster through LMGs and SMGs. I tend to forget how many guns there are. I don't want to make this video an hour long, so I'm going to try to go a little faster. Bruin is great, still very good. I'll show you a Bruin build at the end of this that I think you should try, especially for Verdansk. It doesn't work very well on Rebirth, but Verdansk, very, very good gun. Finn's accurate without the adverse barrels, and then good TTKs with the adverse barrels, but it's slow, has bad reload times. I don't know, it's not great. Holger's never been great. PKM hits like a truck still, has great TTKs, but it's like the slowest gun in the game. It's just horribly slow to use. The reload time is like over 8 seconds. Just, it's really hard to use. It is fun and it melts people, but it does have those big drawbacks. The raw is still terrible. SA-87 is okay, but I don't think anyone's going to pick the SA-87 over like a Modern Warfare M4. The TTKs aren't that much different, and the M4 is just a beam, so I don't think the SA-87 is really worth using. SMGs quickly. I made an AUG video about a week and a half ago. Still my favorite SMG. That thing just melts people. I love it with the 30 round mag, the 5.56 30 round with sleight of hand. Somebody said that, I was on Twitter, and somebody said that the 30 round just didn't have enough damage for them, and I'm like, but you were obsessed with the OTS, and it has basically the same damage per mag as the OTS, if not even a little bit more in some situations, depending on what shot locations you hit. So I don't understand that argument, really. I think the AUG is fantastic right now, and I think the 60 round mag is going to slow you down way too much. I would never recommend anyone use the 60 round mag, unless they're playing maybe in lower lobbies where mobility is not quite as important. But 30 round mag is definitely what I prefer. CX9 is actually pretty good right now. CX9 is a Modern Warfare gun that was added pretty recently. It's in a pretty good spot. We'll talk about the CX9 some when we get into builds. Modern Warfare MP5 is in a pretty good spot as well. It's one of the fastest to kill guns. I wanted to make a dedicated video on this because, one, any MP5 video, Modern Warfare MP5, gets like 1 million views because everyone loved Modern Warfare MP5. And two, because it actually is one of the fastest killing guns right now, kind of back in its king position where it has the fastest chest TTKs. So I might make a video about that. We'll see. What else here? Uzi, not very good. Bison, not very good. Some people have been talking about the Bison. I'm not on board for the Bison train. MP7 is always pretty good. Good sniper support. Really, really accurate, obviously. Decent mobility. One of the things you could try, so if you put like a 60 round mag in the MP7, it kills the mobility. So something you could try is the default mag on the MP7 is actually 40. So that's actually not that far off of the 60 round mag. So I don't know that it's worth taking the 60 round and having that hit to mobility. Just run the 40 round mag with sleight of hand, and you'll be able to get plenty of damage downrange to people and shouldn't have too much trouble there. All right, so real quickly, I want to compare the top Modern Warfare primaries with what I think is the best primary in the game right now, which is the Cold War AK. I think the Cold War AK, EM2, C58, XM4 really are all kind of probably top tier guns right now. But I think there's a lot that aren't far off, and I think all of these Modern Warfare guns I'm about to cover are not far off. So I'm only going to talk about a few of them. I can't talk about every single gun on the list. That would take forever. So I've got what I think are my favorite 3 Modern Warfare guns right now to use as a primary. That would be the M4A1, the Grau, and the Bruin. So the AK-47 from Cold War is the benchmark. We're trying to get something that can beat that at range. So we get that in orange, the M4A1 in magenta, cyan is the Grau, and then the green color is Bruin. So we're focusing primarily out at range. So right off the bat, you can see the Grau has by far the worst chest TTKs. I believe all of these have 5.56 profiles now. I think they changed the Bruin. I think they all have the same. Yeah, they do. Okay. So if we look at chest shots, it's going to be the same as stomach and extremities. We'll look at neck shots as well. But looking out at range, the Grau has the slowest TTK, which makes sense because it has by far the best ADS times. So these are the recommended builds up here for these guns. Remember, if you're on console, if you're stuck at ADFOV, maybe try a holographic sight instead of a VLK, or even, I mean, you could even go with a red dot sight because you're getting so much zoom compared to what these people that you're watching their YouTube videos are recommending. I have a video on that from a few weeks ago titled something like Best Optics for Console or something like that. So if you're curious about how that works, go check that out. I think it's a really interesting video that a lot of people didn't understand how different ADFOV can make your zoom of your different optics. So if you're on console, try a holographic sight. If you're on PC with affected FOV at a high FOV setting, VLK is going to be a really good option for you. Or something else to try would be the 3.25x Scout Combat. If you want a lot more zoom, that works really well in Verdansk with a lot of these low recoil guns. But anyway, back to the topic. The Grau has the worst TTKs, but has by far the best ADS time. So you'll see if I include ADS time at 100%, all of a sudden the Grau is all the way down here. So there are situations where ADS time is super important, even at range. And the Grau has fantastic ADS times. Cold War AK also has very good ADS times, but the Grau has the fastest of this bunch. So if we turn that back off and just look at base TTKs, Grau's the slowest, followed by the M4, but the M4 actually wins from 34 meters out to 45 meters. And then from there on, it wins over the Grau again. But the Cold War AK basically wins everywhere on this chart against everything. But I do think I think the M4 is more accurate. I think the Bruin's more accurate. I think the Grau is more accurate. So the effective TTK of those 3 guns, I think, could easily match that of the Cold War AK at range. The one thing that is so nice about the Cold War AK is that it has good ADS times, and it has this crazy good TTK in that first 40 meters or so. So anytime you have that gun out and you need that mid-close range engagement to happen, the Cold War AK is going to fry. But the Grau and the M4 actually aren't that far behind. They're about 50 milliseconds behind that first range, so that's not terrible, especially, again, because it's more accurate. They shoot faster. They're going to flinch your enemy more. I think all 3 of these guns are extremely viable. The Bruin build I was talking about was basically this build, except use that Scout Combat with the 3.25x. So if you're on console, that's basically the same as using a VLK. So if you're on console, VLK. If you're on PC with affected setting, try the Scout Combat 3.25x. Obviously change the reticle, but it's a really good gun, and you get tons of range out of that optic. All right, let's move on and talk about the SMGs for Modern Warfare that are competitive. So I talked about the Modern Warfare MP5, the MP7, the CX9, and the AUG. So those are the ones that make the list. And then trying to find what I think is the best. So I've talked about this a bunch in my other videos. I feel like there's 2 kinds of SMGs. There's the one that's more like hyper aggressive, where you want good mobility and fantastic TTKs, but it's gonna have really short damage range. And then there's the second type where it's more of an all-rounder SMG, where you can extend the damage range out. It's still pretty accurate at range. So those are kind of the 2 different types of SMGs, and there's actually one on this list that I think is kind of a hybrid of both of those, so we'll talk about that. But as far as pushy, super aggressive SMGs, which is what you use with a main AR when you want to play really aggressive, I think the OTS-9, the Modern Warfare MP5, and the Cold War MP5, all 3 are absolutely S tier. They have the best TTKs, the best DPS, really good mobility still. I think they're all 3. It's hard to pick a winner there, so I just put the OTS on here just because I think it is one of the best. It does have the best mobility of the group. And as always, these are all my actual recommended builds up here. I want to talk about some of them specifically, but looking at DPS on the chest here, the Modern Warfare AUG and the MP5 from Modern Warfare are both at the top of the list, very close, within literally 1 DPS of each other on chest shots. It's just that the Modern Warfare AUG has way more damage range. So the Modern Warfare MP5 goes out to 10 meters. The AUG goes out to 16.5 meters with my recommended build. So that's an extra 6 meters. Pretty significant increase in damage range. And then also, while we're talking about that, if you want to look at extremities, you're going to see that the AUG from Modern Warfare just melts on extremities compared to every other SMG. That's one of the things that's so good about it. With that 5.56 30-round mag, it's so consistent across the entire body. It will just melt people no matter where you hit them. And it really is my favorite SMG right now. So really, really good players that are really good at mobility and things like that tend to prefer something like the OTS or the Cold War MP5 over the AUG. 1, for damage per mag, and 2, because the mobility is better and they're better at utilizing that mobility. But for me, I've always been someone who prefers really good TTKs over anything else. So what I do is I try to keep my mobility as good as possible, give myself really good damage range, and have amazing TTKs, and that's what this AUG build does. And it works for me, and I fry people with this AUG build. Let's go back to chest, though. OTS is this orange line, a little bit slower than the Modern Warfare AUG and the Modern Warfare MP5, but still very good. Like I said, it has the best mobility of any gun in the game. So that, on top of having a little bit better damage range than the MP5, fantastic choice for a pushy SMG. The CX9 is the one that's unique. So the CX9, I feel like, is kind of a hybrid of those two types of SMGs. All of its DPS and TTK numbers fall in between the aggressive SMGs and the controllable long-range SMGs. And it also has a middle-of-the-pack damage range. So it has more damage range than most of the SMGs that are for really aggressive play. And the recoil is okay. It's not very good in terms of really long-range use, but for that mid-range stuff, it's a really good SMG. So I've got recommended builds up here. We're going to go through these because I actually think there's some unique stuff to talk about. And then for the more long-range SMGs, I think for me, the PPSH right now is king. The MAC-10 is still really good. It's just really low damage per mag. But the PPSH has great mobility, better DPS and TTKs in the MAC-10. It's similar to the AK-74U in terms of TTKs and DPS, but it has better mobility again, which is just always a huge plus. And you can see out at range, the cyan line is the PPSH. Has fantastic TTKs out at range and DPS. And then I put the MP7 on here. So the MP7 is sort of similar to the CX9 in that regard, where it's kind of like a hybrid of the both, but it has much better recoil than the CX9. So that's what makes it more of the long-range all-around SMG. The TTKs are worse out at range, but it's way more accurate, and that way more than makes up for it. So let's go talk about these builds real fast because they do some interesting things. All right, so I'm going to talk about the Cold War builds as well, just because I think they're interesting. So OTS 9, I use Cruise Suppressor, Task Force, Ember Sighting Point, 40-round Fast Mag, and Bruiser Grip. So basically what this does, the reason I use Ember Sighting Point, this is something weird that not a lot of people do, gives like 10% increase in damage range, which that on top of the Task Force barrel, on top of the Cruise Suppressor, means you have pretty good damage range on the OTS, on top of having those great TTKs and great mobility. It does slow your ADS time down a lot. Every single one of these attachments, except Bruiser Grip and the Task Force, hurt your ADS by quite a bit. But the thought behind this is, and this is a real thing that works, Bruiser Grip gives you better hipfire, Ember Sighting Point gives you better hipfire. If someone is 10 or 15 meters away, you don't have to be full ADS before you start shooting if you have good hipfire. The hipfire cone linearly decreases as you're ADSing, and if it's already small to start with, if you click ADS and fire at the same time, you're going to hit probably 3 or 4 shots before you even get fully ADS'd if they're inside that 15-meter mark. So it doesn't matter that your ADS time isn't super fast, as long as you understand that you have to start firing before your hipfire is done. So that works really, really well with the OTS. Surprise people with that. The AUG build, I covered this in the AUG video, so I'm not going to go over this. Just go watch my AUG video from a week ago. My favorite SMG right now. Amazing damage range, DPS. PPSH, pretty standard grip, or standard build here. The only difference is patrol grip. I think the patrol grip's massively underrated. Watch one of your VODs sometime and time how much of the time you're sprinting. It'll be a lot. Most of your movement will be sprinting. Even when you're in fights up close, almost all your movement will be sprinting. I think the patrol grip is underrated because it gives that 7% boost to sprint speed, whereas the Tiger team only gives a 3% boost to sprint speed. The Bruiser grip only gives a 3% boost to sprint speed. I think the patrol grip is very underrated. If you put the patrol grip on top of a Tiger team spotlight, you just zoom around the map. It's crazy how fast you can move. CX9, This is a good build for the CX9. So it's monolithic suppressor, 50 round drum. This is basically the no stock, the CXFR stock. Sleight of hand with the 50 round drum gives you ridiculously fast reload times, and then 5mm laser. I want to keep the mobility up, so I don't want to put a grip on it. I don't want to put anything that's going to hurt mobility. So like the barrels all either hurt mobility or they kill your damage range, which isn't what I want to do. So I just put 5mm on there because it's nice to have. And again, you can do the same trick with this as that you do with the OTS, where you start firing before you're fully ADS. You're going to hit some shots. This has good damage range, good mobility, ridiculously fast reload time, good hip fire. 5mm always a plus for an SMG because it helps with sprint to fire as well. It's another big plus there. So MP7, I talked about this some. This is not using the 60 round mag, so I use monolithic suppressor and strike barrel. I use strike barrel because it increases your bullet velocity and damage range by a bunch, but doesn't hurt your hip fire, doesn't hurt your mobility. It's just a really nice attachment for an SMG. All the long barrels from Modern Warfare that have recoil control murder your hip fire and murder your mobility, so that's why we don't use the recon barrel for the MP7, because it's an SMG and we don't want either of those things. We replaced the 60 round mag with sleight of hand. The damage per mag with 40 is pretty low, but sleight of hand reload is really quick, so I think you can get away with it. No stock to up the mobility. 5mm again, really helps with hip fire, really helps with sprint to fire times. This is a nasty SMG. This is actually really good. We'll go look at the mobility numbers and compare these to the OTS and stuff. You're going to see that the way I've built these Modern Warfare guns, they have very competitive mobility still. Modern Warfare MP5, sort of along the same train of thought as the MP7. Monolithic integral suppressor for max damage range, 45 round mag. That's just necessary. Sleight of hand because the MP5 reload is terrible. You want sleight of hand for sure. FTAC collapsible is the no stock attachment for the MP5, so that helps with mobility, helps with hip fire, hurts your recoil, but again, MP5 is a really pushy gun, so you're not really going to be using it at any sort of range, so it doesn't matter that the recoil is not very good. And then 5mm, again, same reasons as the MP7, CX9, and OTS. Gives you that ability to start firing before you're fully ADS'd, and helps with your sprint to fire time, and just gives you great hip fire regardless. Let's look at the actual mobility of these builds. And you're going to see that they're actually pretty competitive. The only ones that are going to fall behind are going to be the CX9 and the AUG. But base movement speed, the OTS, the way I built it, is 5.27 meters per second, which is crazy fast. That's basically the fastest you can get in the game. I think, let me look at this. The only thing that could make it faster would be a Tiger Team Spotlight for regular movement speed. But yeah, it's basically the fastest gun in the game. AUG is down at 4.84 meters per second, which is quite a bit slower. It's about 10% slower. So again, it's a slower gun, but the TTKs make up for it in my opinion. PPSH, with the way I've built it, super fast movement speed and a ridiculously fast sprint speed. So I just wanted to highlight that because I put the patrol grip on there. So you get 7.6 meters per second sprint speed, which is way faster than the OTS even when you have the patrol grip on there. And like I said, most of your movement time is going to be sprinting. Looking at the CX9, it's a little slower. It's down like the AUG. That's really a bummer for me for the CX9, that the movement speed's so slow. It doesn't make sense. The ADS movement speed's fantastic. We'll talk about that in a second. But the movement speed is terrible. And that's because of that 50 round drum. The 50 round drum just kills it. Even with the no stock, you just can't make up for it. And that's annoying to me because the gun's pretty good. MP7 gets over that 5 meters per second mark, which is really good. So does the MP5. MP7 with that build has great ADS movement speed, similar to the CX9. Faster actually than the OTS and the PPSH. So that's really nice. That's one of the big benefits of the MP7 CX9. They have great ADS movement speed. Modern Warfare MP5 is pretty good at 3.26, but then looking at sprint speeds, you're going to see the Cold War guns have dramatically faster sprint for some reason. I don't know why that is, but just base sprint speeds of the Cold War guns is way faster. So the OTS with these attachments is 3.3, 7.3. The PPSH is 7.6. So you can see 6.45 for the AUG, 6.35 for the CX9, 6.7 for the MP7, and then 6.5 for the MP5. Just way slower there. So that's a big downside of these Modern Warfare guns. But overall, I think you can use any of these. If you want best mobility, you still have to go with the Cold War guns. But this AUG build fries. The MP7 build is really good. Modern Warfare MP5 has the best chest TTKs in the game right now, again, like it used to. So overall, lots of good guns from Modern Warfare you can use right now. And I think that'll make a lot of people happy because we liked those Modern Warfare guns. We didn't like when we had to use Cold War guns because they were just felt awkward in some ways compared to the Modern Warfare ones. So that's all I wanted to cover. I did not intend for this video to be an hour long as usual, but it ended up being super long anyway, and I have a hard time with that. So I'm working on it, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video and found it useful. I'll see you all in the next one. I don't know when it'll be. I'm working super hard on the programming of the website right now, trying to get the premium features out. We've got a lot of stuff coming down the pipeline literally in the next week or two. I've been talking about this stuff for a year, but we're actually finally close. So I'm really excited for that. Hopefully we can get those features out to you in the next week or two. But yeah, I'll see you guys all in the next video, whenever that is. Have a good day.